Welcome back to Flying Fundamentals, the guide to the basics of aviation from the staff of ATC24, the official ATC roleplay server for ptfs on Roblox. This video makes up the official ATC24 guide. You are not required to watch this video to join ATC24, but the information covered is base knowledge that all members of ATC24 should be familiar with. My name is MJ and I'll be taking you through this lesson's topics, radiotelephony. But first off, what does radiotelephony mean? Well, let's break it down. Telephony is a noun referring to the use of telephones to transmit data. The radio prefix indicates that this transmit of data is achieved by radio waves. Simply, it refers to the method and practices for ATC to pilot communication via radio. Unusually for this series, today's video has no split IRL versus ATC24 sections, as all aspects covered apply to both real aviation and ATC24 roleplay. We'll start by looking at the NATO Phonetic Alphabet. Then we'll go over good radio telephony practices you should adopt when speaking on the radio. Then we'll go through some basic phraseology, which is the simplification of words and phrases within aviation radio. And finally, we'll look at some common airport terminology. Firstly, let's look at the phonetic alphabet. Its full title is the International Radiotelephony Spelling Alphabet, but it's more commonly known as the NATO Phonetic Alphabet. The NATO Phonetic Alphabet is a 26-word code. Each letter in the English language is assigned a different word. You may already be familiar with it without even realizing, especially if Alpha, Bravo and Charlie sound familiar to you, as these are the first three words in the phonetic alphabet, representing A, B and C. These are used across all aviation to improve clarity. Crackly radios often make it difficult to distinguish letter sounds. For example, B, D, P and T over a background noise can very easily be confused for each other, whereas their phonetic counterparts, Bravo, Delta, Papa and Tango, are much easier to tell apart. Here is the full NATO phonetic alphabet, as well as how to pronounce each word. I'll go through them now. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel, India, Juliet, Kilo, Lima, Mike, November, Oscar, Papa, Quebec, Romeo, Sierra, Tango, Uniform, Victor, Whiskey, X-Ray, Yankee and Zulu. Numbers are also included in the NATO phonetic alphabet, with 0 pronounced as 0, 1 pronounced as 1, 2 pronounced as 2, 3 pronounced as tree, 4 pronounced as fower, 5 pronounced as fife, 6 pronounced as 6, 7 pronounced as 7, 8 pronounced as 8, and 9 pronounced as niner. This is also done in the name of clarity. Additionally, when saying thousand, the ICAO procedures state that it is to be pronounced as thousand, whereas FAA procedures say for it just to be said as thousand. Even more contentious is the decimal point, pronounced as decimal by the ICAO, but given the entirely different word point by the FAA. So, where can you expect to hear these phonetic words and weirdly pronounced numbers? Well, everywhere. Wherever a letter or number is needed to be referenced on the radio, the phonetic alphabet is used. So, you could hear it in aircraft call signs, altitude readings, speed readings, headings, for runway numbers, or for taxiway names. Wherever there is a letter or number, expect to use the phonetic alphabet. We'll now explore what good radiotelephony looks and sounds like. in order to achieve short, safe, and efficient transmissions of information over the radio. Before you open up your mic for the first time to request a clearance or to say hello, good pilots and controllers will check their radio is functioning and is set to the correct volume. In an ATC24 context on Discord, this can be done by going to your voice and video settings, testing your microphone, and setting a push-to-talk keybind. Next, ensure the correct frequency is selected for the station you wish to contact. On Discord, ensure you have joined the correct VC. Before transmitting anything, listen. It is very likely in a busy frequency that someone else will be speaking when you join. Ensure they have fully finished before you attempt to make contact. Always think through and plan what you are about to say before you say it, so as to avoid including unnecessary information or skipping out important information. If necessary, you can write down what you plan to say and then read it out. Ensure you have fully pressed down on your transmit or push to talk button before you speak, to ensure the first part of your message isn't clipped. So you've done all your checks and now you're ready to speak. Whilst you speak, ensure you keep a normal conversational tone. Don't talk too fast or too slow, and speak clearly, maintaining a normal rhythm, volume and pitch. Do not turn or move your head closer or further from your microphone while speaking, as this can distort speech. For transmissions involving numbers, a slight pause before and after the numbers can make them easier to understand. For example, flight level 0, 1, 0. Avoid hesitation sounds such as or If necessary, release your transmission button if you need time to think. Finally, make use of standard phraseology, which we'll look at later. Avoid unnecessary transmissions. Finally, your message is over. Ensure you fully finish speaking before releasing your transmit button. Allow a period of at least 10 seconds to elapse whilst waiting for a response before attempting a second context. Always read back any instructions given to you. We'll go over what this entails later on. If you do not understand what you are being told, ask for clarification. Never guess about what you're being told. Always be sure. At all times when connected to a frequency, you should be listening. Listening for your call sign to be mentioned, as you may be given new information instructions. Listening for new traffic or weather advisories. And you should also be listening to other pilots. So that's how to generally behave on the radio. But what actual content should be included in your messages? Well, that's where phraseology comes in. Phraseology is the content of radio transmissions, and oftentimes this content is shortened or abbreviated to make messages more efficient and information dense. But let's start simple. Call signs, as you may know, are how aircraft and ATCs are named, identified, and referred by over the radio. There are two main call signs that aircraft will utilize. The first are called registration call signs. All aircraft are required to have a unique alphanumeric code displayed on the outside of their fuselage, and some aircraft, usually small aircraft, will use this code as their call sign on the radio. For example, Golf, Foxtrot, Alpha, Mike, Juliet. The first one or two characters of the code usually indicate the country in which that aircraft was registered. For example, the prefix Golf relates to the United Kingdom. The prefix November relates to the USA. And the prefix Juliet Alpha relates to Japan. These call signs are permitted but not very popular on ATC24, and the use of a correct country's registration is not required. If you wish to use this type of call sign, pick any code you like. The other call sign type is company call signs, used by airlines and air cargo companies. These are by far the most used type of call sign on ATC24. They consist of an airline's specific call sign and then additional numbers and letters. For example, Air France 1234. As you can see, some airlines just use their airline name as their call sign. Others use different words for their call signs. For example, British Airways use the radio call sign of Speedbird. Jet2 use the call sign Chanex, and EasyJet shorten their call sign to just Easy. You can find lists of all the airlines in the world and their radio call signs online just by Googling, but you can also find a list of just the airlines that are in ptfs and their correct call signs on the airliner to call sign conversion table located in the ATC24 resources channel. Controllers also have to be referenced over the radio, so they too have call signs. Their call signs are much easier to understand as they always consist of the same format. They start with the aerodrome name or the name of the control center where the controller is based, followed by the type of controller they are. For example, Rockford Tower, Perth Ground, or Bartholomew Centre. If you are unsure about the different types of controllers, make sure to watch our video on the different types of controllers. Let's go over some common shortenings and abbreviations that you'll often hear on aviation radios. First up is AFIRM, short for affirmative and of meaning yes. For example, the question could be, confirm maintaining flight level 40. Response, AFIRM. Next is approved, meaning permission granted. This phrase is only ever used by ATCs when they are responding positively to a request made by a pilot. For example, if a pilot requested to climb 2,000 feet for terrain, a response could be approved. Then there is break, which is used by controllers to separate sections of long messages, or perhaps to change who they are talking to within the same message. For example, Speedbird 231 descend flight level 030, break Air France 4451, reduce speed 250 knots. The next step up from this is break, which performs the same function but is repeated for clarity owing to a very busy environment. It emphasizes the importance of the second section of the message. The next phrase is cleared, used by controllers to give permission for a certain action, e.g., cleared for takeoff. Next is a slightly more uncommon phrase of confirm. It asks the recipient to check something. For example, confirm takeoff clearance for Speedbird 231. Next up is contact, an instruction mainly used to transfer pilots over to a new controller. Speedbird 221, contact Rockford Tower. When being told to contact a station, it's up to you to make first contact with that station. Correct means what it normally means, but it is usually used in the context of ATCs responding to readbacks, which we will look at shortly. Here is a handy phrase for you to know when starting out. Correction. If you make a mistake in a radio transmission, this is how you correct yourself. Climb flight level 030. Correction, climb flight level 040. Another useful phrase for beginners is disregard. If you realize partway through a transmission that you have made a massive mistake or said the wrong thing, just say disregard. The opposite of approved is negative, and it's used in the same context of controllers responding to pilot's request. The next phrase is cancelled or cancel, where a controller removes permission for an action that they previously gave permission for due to the scenario changing. For example, Speedbird 221 takeoff clearance cancelled, acknowledge. For high-risk scenarios such as that example, where a pilot not having heard an instruction could lead to danger, the phrase acknowledge is often applied, requiring the pilot to respond acknowledging their understanding of the message. Report is mainly used by controllers to request information from someone. For example, Speedbird 221 reports runway in sight. Request is used by pilots to request certain information or approvals from ATC. For example, Speedbird 221 requests taxi. Say again can have two meanings. The first and most common is a request from one station asking the previous station to repeat their last transmission as it was not understood or heard. Say again. It can also be used in the first person when a station, normally a controller, wants to greatly emphasize a piece of information. For example, Speedbird 221 turn left heading 270, I say again, left heading 270. A further variation is say again slower, which as it sounds is a request for the previous station to repeat their last transmission at a slower speed. Stand by is a phrase used by controllers, asking aircraft to not send another transmission until the controller speaks to them again. For example, Speedbird 221, stand by. Whereas contact is an instruction telling pilots to switch to a new controller and establish communication with them, monitor is an instruction to switch to a new controller but not establish communication. So, in an ATC-24 context, if told to monitor Rockford Tower, you would join the Rockford Tower VC, but you would not say anything until the controller calls on you. If you are ever given an instruction that you are not able to do, the correct response is unable, normally followed by an explanation of why you cannot perform said action. Check's meaning is unchanged. Speedbird 221 check landing gear. Next up is Roger, meaning simply transmission received. Words twice is a very uncommon request on ATC-24 as we do not suffer with poor radio background noise or interference, but it is a request for a station to say every word twice in their message. Next up is hold position, an instruction meaning stop used for aircraft that are taxiing. There is also hold short, often used in taxi instructions to indicate where an aircraft should stop and not enter. For example, Speedbird 221 hold short of Alpha. Finally, there is Wilco. Wilco is a shortening of will comply and indicates an understanding of a message and an intent to carry it out. Wilco should never replace a readback, however, and we'll look at how and when to do readbacks now. So, we've mentioned them a few times, but what actually are readbacks? Put simply, readbacks are repeating an instruction that you have just received from an ATC back to them. This both lets the ATC know what you've heard, that you've heard them, and that you've heard them correctly. ATCs will listen to your readback to check for any inaccuracies, and will identify any mistakes you have made so that they can correct them before you carry out the instruction. The types of instructions that you have to repeat back to the controller include taxi instructions, radar vector instructions. If you don't know what radar vectors are, be sure to watch our video on them. Route clearances, such as IFR or VFR clearances, any type of approach clearance, any runway clearance, including landings, takeoffs and crossings, as well as any frequency change to a different controller that you are given. The standard format which readback should follow is the ATC saying the call sign and then the clearance, and then the pilots repeating the clearance and ending by saying their own call sign. For example, the controller would say, Speedbird 221, clear to land, runway 25 left. Pilot says, clear to land, runway 25 left, Speedbird 221. The purpose of placing the call sign at the end is to let others know on the frequency that your message, and as long as your readback is correct, your current interaction with the controller is complete. Now let's move on to conditional clearances. A conditional clearance is effectively a clearance in advance that only comes into effect when another action has happened. For example, an aircraft could be cleared to push back after another aircraft has passed behind them. This method allows controllers to achieve higher efficiency and improve traffic flow, but can also be more ambiguous and confusing for pilots. To ease this confusion, conditional clearances are always structured in the same way. call sign, condition, subject of condition, and then the instruction. Let's use the example, Speedbird 221, after the Air France A320 has passed behind you, push and start approved. We can see the call sign here is Speedbird 221, the condition is after, the subject is the Air France A320, and the main instruction is to push and start. Conditional clearances must always be read back for safety. If you ever do not understand a conditional clearance, do not do the action. Hold position and ask for clarification. That brings us to the end of our crash course through phraseology. We have by no means covered everything, but we have covered the basics. More specific phraseology and procedures will be discussed in our other videos focusing in on those topics. The final section in this video is a shorter one, looking through some basic airport terminology. First up are runways. Runways are elongated rectangular surfaces designed for the landing and taking off of aircraft. Runways can be human-made, often asphalt, concrete, or a mixture of both, or natural surfaces such as grass, dirt, gravel, ice, sand, or salt. As you can see on the picture, runways are named using two numbers. So here we have runway 30. These numbers reference the heading or compass direction that the runway is pointing in. So this runway is pointing in the direction 300 degrees. A further example would be that runway 01 would be pointing at a heading of 10 degrees. Occasionally, runway names will also include a letter. This is done when there are multiple runways pointing in the same direction, so they would have the same number. Therefore, to avoid confusion, the rightmost runway of a pair is given an R standing for right, as seen in this picture of runway 30 right. The leftmost runway is given an L for left, and should there be three runways pointing in the same direction, a C can be used to stand for centre. A taxiway is a path for aircraft at an airport connecting runways with aprons, hangars, terminals, and other facilities. They mostly have a hard surface, such as asphalt or concrete, though smaller general aviation airports sometimes use gravel or grass. Taxiways are named using letters. For example, Taxiway Alpha, Taxiway Bravo, or Taxiway Charlie. On ATC 24, taxiway names often include numbers as well, such as Taxiway Alpha 1. As you can see in the picture, when taxiways connect to runways, they will either do so at a 90-degree angle or a shallower 30-degree angle. The 90-degree connections are mainly utilised by departing aircraft lining up onto the runway to take off. But for landing aircraft, exiting by a 90-degree turn means that they have to slow down a lot. So to speed up how fast they can exit the runway, those 30-degree high-speed exits are used. Holding points are lines painted across taxiways indicating a position for aircraft to hold, stop, and wait for further clearance. In real life, they can be used to protect ILS-sensitive areas and can also be placed wherever necessary on an airport's taxiways. But on ATC 24 and ptfs, we only utilise holding points next to runways to ensure runways are not entered at incorrect times. As you can see in this image, the holding point markings on the taxiway show two solid lines and two dashed lines. If you are approaching from the direction of the two solid lines, as this aircraft is, you need permission to cross the line. If you are coming from the other direction, i.e. exiting the runway, you do not need permission to cross the line. When exiting the runway, you need to make sure the tail of your aircraft is all the way across the line before you stop, in order to make sure you're clear of any other arriving or departing traffic. Holding points are named similar to taxiways by a letter or multiple letters plus a number or multiple numbers. For example, holding point Alpha 1, holding point Alpha 1 2, or holding point Alpha Bravo. Dependent on which country you ask, a gate or a stand is a designated area for aircraft parking. These stands can either be connected, located next to a terminal building, or remote. Airports will often have many different stands, differing sizes and purposes. Stands or gates are named via numbers, for example, Stand 1, Stand 11, and Stand 342. Airport stands are normally located on a section of the airport known as the apron. This is the section of tarmac where aircraft are parked, unloaded, loaded, refueled, boarded and maintained, and as such are normally very busy with aircraft and ground crew vehicles. Aprons are sometimes given general names to split them up, such as North Apron or South Apron. Other times they are named after their purpose, such as Cargo Apron, General Aviation Apron. Other names for apron include the ramp, or informally, the tarmac. Thank you for watching this guide. I hope you found it useful and informative. Feel free to leave any questions in the comment section below or utilise the ATC24 questions ticket system on the Discord server. Have a lovely day. ATC24, where the reason you apply, turning chaos into perfect minds. We're soaring high, keeping the world alive. How the night's alive in ATC24 we thrive. So grab